From the start, humanity has always had some level of income inequality. Not a single society is without it. Even communist countries experience this. The question isn't if there is income inequality. Instead, the question is if the level of income inequality in the United States is acceptable. This is the Gini index, and it's used to measure income inequality. The straight line represents perfect income equality. An unrealistic expectation, as this would mean everybody is paid equally, regardless of age or profession. The Lorenz curve is a graphical representation of the actual distribution of income. The gap between the two is the Gini index. 0 represents perfect equality and 1 is total inequality. Now that we know this, let's look at the United States household income from 1993 to 2022. And wow, do we see a pattern. Remember, the higher the Gini index, the more income inequality there is. If we look at the bottom, we see that upper class income is increasing exponentially in comparison to the middle and bottom. Interestingly enough, it does look like there's a small drop in the Gini index in 2022. We can see this more closely in the data for 2021. The poorest 20% of Americans made 2.9% of the total income, while the richest 20% of Americans made 52.7% of the income. In 2022, the bottom group earned 3% of the total income, and the top group earned 52.1% of the total income. Overall, we can see that distribution of income is slightly becoming more equal. To make it clear, the distribution of wealth still isn't good, as the top 5% earns 23.5% of the total income. This small drop is likely just the result of COVID-19 and government assistance targeted at helping the middle and bottom class rather than the upper class. Now that we understand the level of inequality in the United States, let's look back at the question I asked earlier. If the level of inequality in the United States is acceptable. Let's start with those who say yes, it's acceptable, as just because the distribution of wealth is growing doesn't necessarily mean that more people are suffering. The Gini index tells us the level of inequality, but it doesn't tell us how or why. It's argued that overall, more money is going to the whole population, it's just that the upper class share is growing faster. Inequality in wealth is built into capitalism, as the US has the largest amount of billionaires out of any country. This is often seen as a sign that there are more opportunities for prosperity in our country. The American dream, in other words. Others dispute these claims, arguing that countries with high Gini indexes experience high crime rate, drug abuse, and violence. The high concentration of wealth for the rich also leads to political inequality, as they have a disproportionate say in politics. Naturally, the rich would pick laws that benefit the rich. Inequality erodes trust in the government, as people feel disconnected and left out of public policies. So how do you go about lowering wealth inequality? Is this a federal issue, a state issue, or is it up to the individual to self-improve? Those with higher educations earn far more than those with less. The gap is only increasing. As technology advances, the need for better education is rising. Some say that the government should put more effort into improving the educational system, or making it easier for students to get into colleges or universities. If we look at the data, we see that racial inequality in income is prevalent, as we see whites and Asians consistently ahead of all other races in the US. The same goes for gender inequality, as men earn more than women. Home life also plays a large part in income distribution. Family households with married couples often earn more than non-family households. We see that generational wealth plays a large role in income equality, as well-off homes often have the money to give their children educations. That is why people push for government to increase childcare, as well-off childhoods with a good education directly correlates with higher incomes. There's also a push for government to hire the minimum wage or create social programs that get people to work. Not all states have the same distribution of wealth. Some states have greater levels of poverty than others. This is due to numerous factors, some previously stated, like education and employment opportunities. Some states have better access to affordable care or cheaper housing. Wealth inequality can't just be regulated as a federal issue, as states are all different. You can't expect the same wealth for rural and urban areas. Lastly, there's us as the people. What is something you can do? Well, you can always get involved in politics. You can donate, be engaged with your community, volunteer, or even make a video.